Okay, well, look, we might kick off now. I think there's a fair chunk of the audience online now. So, well, good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us from around Australia for this 9th AAAA webinar on the important topic of supporting your employees' mental health. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Stuart Charity. I'm the CEO of the AAAA, and I'll also be acting as the MC for tonight's session. Well, to say it's been quite a year so far is probably the understatement of the century. You recall back, it seems a long time ago now, but 2020 started with bushfires that have been raging for months, destroying land, wildlife, rural businesses and homes. It also triggered one of the biggest fundraising efforts of all time in Australia, with tens of millions of dollars being raised to support those impacted by this natural disaster. But before those fundraising activities and rebuilding affected communities could be completed, we heard the term coronavirus for the first time. And the COVID-19 pandemic developed throughout February and led to a nationwide lockdown in early March. And here we are today at the back end of July with state and national borders still closed. And here in Victoria, we're back in stage 3 lockdown with homeschooling. And there's a mandatory requirement to wear face masks in public kicking in at midnight tonight. Who would have thought the start of the year would be in this place? And right around Australia, daily use of PPE, social distancing and Zoom meetings are just now standard practice in doing business and working in our jobs. Add to that, we now have the highest unemployment rate in Australia for 30 years, much of the economy on government stimulus. And from my perspective, one of the most bitter pills of all for us Victorians to take, Queensland is now the home of the AFL, which is just ridiculous. It has, however, been inspiring to see that our industry has responded with such resilience and optimism. And in these times of rapid change and widespread uncertainty, stress and disruption, the aftermarket's resilience and strength has really shone through. So as the chaos of 2020 rolls on, it's not surprising that some people may be struggling with mental health illness. A lot of people are fatigued from weeks of not being able to see family and friends. They're worried about their jobs and their financial future. There's a whole lot of stresses, family and work-related stresses, all converging. I wouldn't be surprised if there's literally tens of thousands of people that have never had mental health issues before that are really struggling at the moment. And across our industry, we have the added challenge of skills shortages. We just can't afford to risk losing good staff to prolonged periods of leave or resignation because of mental illness and a perceived lack of ability to support an individual with an illness to keep working. And given every workplace and the individuals within it are different, now is a really good time to take a closer look at mental health and why, as business owners and managers, you should ensure that taking the right steps to provide you should ensure that you're taking the right steps to provide a mentally healthy workplace. And providing a supportive workplace is a great way to retain valuable staff. According to Beyond Blue, a study of over 1,000 employees found that almost half of those surveyed had left a workplace in the past because they had a poor environment in terms of mental health. And the study also found a direct link between mentally healthy workforces and workplaces and employees that are more committed to their jobs. In addition, the PwC report in 2014 found that for every dollar that employers spend on successfully implementing effective actions around mental health in the workplace, they gain an average of $2.30 in benefits back. And these benefits come through improved productivity via reduced absenteeism and fewer compensation claims. So to cover this important topic tonight, we have Tiff Conway, who's Head of Marketing and Membership at the AAAA, and she's going to explain why it's important to provide a mentally healthy workplace and also explain what the acronym C.L.E.A.R stands for. Tiff has previous experience in delivering health and wellbeing programs in large workplaces, and she's led workforce take-up of Are You OK Day initiatives and anti-discrimination training, which led to significant improvements in employee morale and productivity. And our special guest speaker tonight is Mark Paccitti, who's founder of Dancing with the Black Dog, a not-for-profit organisation that advocates for reducing stigma around mental health. Mark will provide practical tips on how to build a solid foundation for good mental health and share some of his experience with you. Mark is a great example of someone who's really learned from his mental health challenges and generously shares his knowledge and insights to help others. And we're grateful to have him tonight. Just before we get on to the presentations, I did want to run through a few housekeeping points. So the agenda for tonight is I'll shortly hand over to Tiff and then Mark and to do some of the formal presentations, probably about 30 to 35 minutes in combined duration. And then we'll finish up with an interactive 15-minute Q&A session. And for those of you that have been on our webinars previously, you'll know the drill, and basically we're not able to activate, because there's so many attendees, your microphones. But we'd encourage you to submit questions through the Q&A button via the bottom of your screen. But we'll do that in the last 15 minutes, so get those questions ready. The final point before we go into presentations is that we will be sending a link after tonight to the presentation packs that you'll see tonight. So there's no need to take notes, and we'll also be we're videoing this webinar, so if you want to go back and look at any particular elements, you can do that too. So without further ado, it's my great pleasure to hand over to Tiffany Conway to kick off the presentations. Tiff, over to you.
Thanks very much, Stuart. All right, beautiful. Hopefully everyone can see that all a-okay. All right. So, mental health in the workplace. Firstly, thanks so much for making the time to join us tonight. The fact that you are attending this webinar says that you do care about your team members and your co-workers, and you want to learn more about how to achieve a mentally healthy workplace. So, well done, and thanks so much. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about mental health in Australia. The most prevalent mental illnesses in Australia are depression, anxiety, and substance use disorders. 1 in 5 Australians will experience a mental illness in any given year, and over 45% of the population will experience a mental health disorder at some point in their life. 1 in 5 Australians have taken time off work in the past 12 months because they felt stressed, anxious, depressed, or mentally unwell. 4.3 million Australians are on prescription medication for a mental illness. These statistics show it is likely that within your workplace, either someone is living with or is impacted by mental illness. So, in the context of the national picture, is the automotive aftermarket any different? And the short answer is yes. For starters, it's male dominated. Over 80% of the automotive aftermarket workforce is male, which means that some common advice about tackling mental health may be ineffective. And the thing I'm talking about there is talking. Substance use is also a little bit more common. So combined with other mental health illnesses such as depression, this may also reduce the willingness to talk, and of course has its own set of challenges. Now, I've put some reference points there and a couple of notes about my presentation. Firstly, some of the slides are a bit wordy. They are wordy because this pack will be passed to you as a reference material, and so it is appropriate to, I guess, provide you with a little bit more than talking points. I've also included throughout the presentation a number of links to websites and specific tools on websites that I think might be helpful for our industry. And the first one that I want to point to is in this first list of references, surprising facts about men's mental health. So when we talk about men may not want to talk up front, they may not want to get everything off their chest. One of the things that research has shown is that men have coping strategies that don't involve talking. And some of these include eating healthily, keeping myself busy, exercise, using humour, doing something to help someone else, spending time with a pet, accepting my feelings, achieve something, and hang out with people who are positive. Now, this is really useful. For me, it provides insight that there are opportunities within the workplace to provide support through constructive, meaningful activity, busyness, helping others, achieving something, and hanging out with positive people. Conversely, if the workplace is undermining these elements, you can see that the impact may be compounded for a man with a mental illness. Overall, talking about the issue may only work on a case-by-case basis, and it may take a little while and a whole lot of trust building to get to that point. The other thing that is apparent in men is that a trigger for mental illness or increased substance use can come from relationship issues, including a breakup. Grief is another trigger to be mindful of and compassionate about. And I really would implore you to use the website resources provided to learn more about mental health conditions most relevant for you, as they will help you to create a safe and healthy workplace. Okay, so what does C.L.E.A.R stand for? And we did ask that question in the invitation. That is your business clear to manage the impact of 2020 on mental health? And C.L.E.A.R just provides a neat way to scan some of the core points of achieving mental health or managing mental health in the workplace. And those key points are around create a safe and healthy workplace, learn about responsibilities and rights, empathise to understand and respond, access helpful resources, remove stigma to have the right conversations. And I'll go through each of those now. So the first one is create a safe and healthy workplace. The mental well-being of people at work is good for everyone and enhances personal and organisational resilience and success. Everyone has a role to play in creating a mentally healthy workplace, and mentally healthy working environments do have a few things in common, and they are positive workplace culture, stress and other risks to mental health are managed, and that is most often or effectively done through managing workloads, deadlines and communication. People with mental health conditions are supported, and there is a zero tolerance approach to discrimination. The goal here is to promote mental well-being, minimise workplace risks to mental health, support people experiencing mental health issues and reduce stigma associated with mental health conditions. And an important point here for any leader or employer is that leading by example is really important. It has a big impact on workplace culture and work processes and how they are designed. Again, I've included a couple of resources here. So the one at the bottom is 9 attributes of a healthy workplace from Heads Up. And the other two are further descriptions about strategies for healthy workplaces and a how-to guide. So Heads Up is part of Beyond Blue. It is employer or workplace focused. So it's quite a useful resource. Okay, next one. Learn about responsibilities and rights. So both employers and employees have formal rights and responsibilities under discrimination, privacy and work health and safety legislation. Employers have a duty of care to protect workers from psychological risks and physical risks, and not fulfilling that duty may lead to a workers' compensation claim being made. Employees have a duty to take reasonable care of their health and safety and not adversely affect the work health and safety of others. I've put some points in there. So workplace health and safety legislation requires workplaces to be, just lost my, as far as reasonably practical. Sorry, I've got covered something. Physically and mentally safe and healthy for all employees. This means steps must be taken to ensure that the working environment does not harm mental health or worsen an existing condition. And there is an overview of the work health and safety law at the Safe Work Australia website. And it's worth having a look at the moment at their COVID-19 support resources, which are on their front landing page. The Australia-wide, and a couple of other relevant points here, the Australia-wide Disability Discrimination Act makes it unlawful to discriminate against, harass or victimise people with disabilities. So where does that come into play here? That is because a disability includes temporary, permanent, past, present or future actual or just presumed mental health conditions. The next point is about the Privacy Act, whereby employers must observe confidentiality and respect the privacy of each employee. This means that an employee's mental health condition can't be shared with anyone without their permission, unless there is a direct risk to their health and safety or that of others. Any information can only be used for the purposes for which it was disclosed, such as arranging adjustments in the workplace to support the employee. Now, with this in mind, all right, so this is pretty heavy stuff. With this in mind, employers might be nervous about having mental health related conversations because the perceived wrong approach could land you with a fair work claim. Equally, not taking action also produces risk to your business. Have a conversation with a HR and legal professional about this. Don't just ignore it. Take action early before a potential problem turns into a big problem. Not taking action to mitigate the risk to your employees, your customers, and yourself could create more negative consequences than unintentionally saying the wrong thing. At the end of this presentation, certainly for AAA members, I'll remind you of the phone number for our Employer Assist hotline, because there's going to be situations within your workplace that are specific to you that could be well worth having a conversation about. The next one is empathise. Empathise to understand and respond. Showing empathy often starts with a conversation. You may spend a lot of time with your staff. This puts you in a good position to notice changes in someone's behaviour or mood, which may indicate that they are not coping. By checking in and asking if they are okay, you could help them to open up and you can show that you care. Now, we've already acknowledged, so providing empathy is really important, and it's an important part of this process. However, we have acknowledged that the 80% and more male population of the automotive aftermarket may not talk much. So how can you show empathy when your employee doesn't want to talk after you have asked, are you okay? Support them to do those activities that help them cope. That is, being included in meaningful work, learning new skills or mentoring others, getting out on time to exercise, walk their dog or be with friends. Maybe grab a coffee or a beer at the right time. Express your support in a kind, genuine and helpful way. So it may not be talking up front, but it may simply be giving them the space to do what you know helps them. The next item is access helpful resources. So straight up, there is a lot of helpful information available. Pick trusted sources most relevant to your workplace and start there. Learn continuously over time. Part of creating a mentally healthy workplace is about embracing and going on that learning journey, if you like, and just picking up bits and pieces of information and relevant information along the way. So what I have provided here is the main ones here are some key organisations that you can visit those websites. I would suggest as a starting point. Most of them have got telephone hotlines. Many of them now have got messaging services. They have got chat rooms. They have got counselling services, etc. What they do have when you're in that initial learning phase is they've got heaps of resources like checklists and fact sheets. And a few that I've mentioned in here that again I thought might be relevant for you are in the heads up. We've got a getting started pack. In Beyond Blue, the anxiety and depression checklist could be relevant for someone who is feeling a bit flat, because it's a checklist to identify whether or not you may have anxiety and depression and to what degree. The Mental Health First Aid website also has mental health first aid guidelines, which is very handy in the workplace, as well as some guidelines around problematic drug use. And the Black Dog Institute, quite relevant at this point in time, coronavirus resources for anxiety and stress. So hopefully they are helpful. And certainly a starting point, and as I said, explore what's relevant to your workplace and your workers The final item is remove stigma to have the right conversations. So people with mental illness may face stigma. They may be treated differently as if they are somehow inferior. Stigma shows when someone with a mental illness may be called dangerous, crazy, moody, unreliable, or incompetent rather than unwell. Stigma can lead people with mental illness to be discriminated against and miss out on work, to be bullied, or to become a victim of violence. It can also mean they don't seek treatment when they need it. Stigma exists mainly because some people don't understand mental health and also because some people have negative attitudes towards it. Again, it is important for managers to lead by example, to foster the right attitudes and behaviours in the workplace, to reduce stigma and increase inclusion. When I think about stigma, a saying that comes to mind for me is the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. As a manager and leader, you should speak up to help educate others. I have included, now that we've gone through C.L.E.A.R, as a way to hopefully perhaps provide a fresh perspective on how to approach mental health in the workplace. Here's a bit of a snapshot or an infographic about key health indicators. And I think it's really interesting that, you know, of this share of, you know, types of diseases and illnesses, the bright yellow in the far left-hand side here is cancer. In the orange, we've got cardiovascular. The third item is mental. Then we have musculoskeletal and injuries. And so my observation there is take a holistic approach to managing health and wellbeing in the workplace. If an employee presented with a broken leg, cancer, depression, asthma, anxiety, back pain, alcoholism, headache, ask yourself, would you treat them differently? Would you give them the same levels of support? Would you make similar types and adjustments to enable them to keep doing their job and doing it well, and to enable them to feel like they're part of your team? All right, in finishing up from me, I again wanted to call your attention to, this is a member-only resource, and a key benefit of being a member of the AAAA is our Employer Assist hotline, and there's a phone number and the email address there. And certainly for any general contact details, the contact details are there as well. So I shall stop sharing my screen at this point, and I am delighted to hand over to Mark Pacchetti, who will share more of his story with you. Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you, Tiffany. So as Tiffany and Stuart have both kindly introduced, my name is Mark Pacchetti. Some people get a bit confused when I first start talking because I've got the unique claim to fame of having an Italian surname, a Scottish accent and an Australian passport, but that's another story. I do want to tell you a little bit more about myself before I begin. I want to tell you a bit more about my own previous mental health struggles, and then talk a little bit more about how I think employers can help, etc. So just a few numbers I'd like to start off with. First of all, the number 50. I'll be turning 50 later this year. And then there's the number 10. 10 years ago this week, not that I'm counting, a few months shy of my 40th birthday, I started taking antidepressants. I'm still taking antidepressants to this day. I've not felt the need for them really for about 8 years, and not just because of medication, but because of action that I took 10 years ago. I feel I really started living. Then there's the number 4. For the first 4 decades of my life, I was always a fairly outgoing person. I like to think I was friendly. I always loved to laugh, and I was a bit of a joker. Everyone thought I was pretty confident and doing okay in life. On the inside, however, if I can be honest with myself, I was a complete mess. I got to the point where I was fractured to the point of breaking. The main condition I was diagnosed with was anxiety with an element of depression. Basically, for years, I was constantly worrying about things, constantly looking for things to worry about if I wasn't worried about something. And sometimes I would find that those worries would literally consume my thoughts for days, weeks, even sometimes months at a time. I would go through the, you know, what if this, what if that, what if I do this, what if I don't do that? And I think, to be honest, I think if I can look back at it as well, part of it came from years of not feeling worthy of having any good things in my life. Again, not going into too much detail, but I was sent to private school as a teenager, but I was surrounded by very rich kids, and I was the son of 2 teachers. So I was, so to me, good things always happen to other people and not to me. And the voice inside my head over the next 20 odd years was constantly making up reasons why I would make mistakes that would cause me to lose everything that I felt I wasn't good enough for. My job, my home, my identity, and my family. All my worries were completely and utterly irrational. None of them ever came true, and yet on the inside, they felt completely real. I like to, I guess I liken it to the analogy of the boiling the frog, which many of you may have heard of. And the analogy is that if you put a frog into a pot of boiling water, it will immediately leap to safety. Whereas if you put a frog into a pot of cold water and slowly and very gradually turn up the temperature, the frog will eventually boil to death. And I felt that I was boiling in my own pot of, again, I guess, anxiety and irrational worries. And I just could not see a way out of it. But one day, I just thought, I've had enough. I will do anything just to stop feeling this way. Unfortunately, I never got to the point where I felt suicidal, but I did get to the point where I felt of absolutely no value at all to my wife and my young family. For years, I'd always thought that if I was to go and see a psychologist or start taking medication, I'd be marked for life. People might say, what's wrong with that guy? You know, he's seeing a psych. Or and back to Tiffany's point earlier as well about men and coping mechanisms. Humour and exercise were my forms of self-medication or my coping mechanisms for many years. But when I did reach the frog boiling point, I guess, the main difference that I made was deciding that I would start taking medication. So I went down to the doctor in an absolute babbling mess, I must admit, 10 years ago this week. And the doctor did explain to me that what works for one may not work for another. Also that it would take a few weeks before the medication would work and things might get worse before they get better. Now I thought, there's no way things are going to get worse. How much worse could they be? But they actually got worse. I was off work for a few weeks, and that was a time when I felt completely and utterly useless. As I say, I never felt suicidal, but I did feel that I was really of no value to my family. But then a few weeks later, I remember I was when I was off work, off on stress leave, and one of the things that I did to help out my wife, she was working full time, and we had a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old child at the time. They're obviously 10 years older themselves now. I would go to the supermarket and I would, take them with me just to try and give my wife a bit of a break. And I remember I was sitting in the car at a set of traffic lights on the way home, and I was in a complete mess. And I looked in the mirror at my then 4-year-old son, Jack, and I said, Jack, I'm sorry I'm being such a terrible dad right now. And then Jack looked at me in the eye, and he said what any 4-year-old would say. He said, no way, Dad, you're the bestest dad ever in the entire universe. And of course, like I say, any 4-year-old would say that about their dad, but he said it with such intensity. It was like he was saying to the black dog inside my own head, don't you dare say that about my dad. And that was the moment when suddenly things started to get better. I realised I actually was of great value to my family just by being there. I took it a step further. Not only did I talk about it, but I also started to, when I started to feel a lot better, I started to write a blog about my experiences, and that's called Dancing with the Black Dog, hence the logo you can see in the background. It's a completely free resource. It's available online, and yeah, you don't even have to sign up for it. I've made it such a way that you don't have to give an email address or anything. What I do also want to stress as well, however, is and I say this in the start of my blog, and I usually say this at the start of talks as well, I'm not a mental health expert, but I am an expert on me, and I can tell you my story. And the reason why I tell people my story is purely in the hope that people might read it. People who are in the same situation as I was 10 years ago can read my story and see that even though it might not feel like it, there is a possible way out, and it is absolutely 100% worth it. Anyway, that's enough about me personally for now. I want to touch a little bit more on some of the points that I think Tiff's raised a couple of them before as well, but from my own experience as well. I realise that obviously we're talking to the Automotive Aftermarket Association here, so it's predominantly males, but obviously I can see there are a lot of females on the call as well. I don't mean to be biased in any way, but it has been, I have seen one statistic as well that shows that middle-aged men are 3 times more likely to take their own life than any other demographic. And a lot of that comes down to the fact that men don't have the coping strategies of being able to openly talk about their mental health problems. But I found when I was talking to a psychologist, she basically helped me work through my problems, just purely from even saying them out loud. It made me realise how irrational I was being in front of somebody who wasn't going to judge me, who wasn't going to get angry with me, wasn't a friend or a wife or whatever, or a husband who was going to say, "Don't be so stupid," which could easily be the action. It was somebody who was years of experience of knowing what questions to ask, and she helped me to start to come to the root cause of what the reason behind my own anxiety was. Just like with medication, one thing that what my doctor said as well though was that when it comes to getting help from a psychologist, what works for one might not work for another either. It took me 3 attempts to find the right psychologist, and the first time I tried one, I thought this is just a waste of time. If the doctor hadn't told me that different psychologists obviously work in different styles, I would have given up. But fortunately, I found one, and ironically, she was literally around the corner from our house, the closest one to where we lived, and she ended up being the right one. There's also one of my biggest worries as well when I was in a bad place was always running out of money. And one of the things that stopped me from going to see a psychologist was thinking, I'm not going to pay $130 an hour and then go back 10 times only to think it doesn't work. And then I heard about what some of you or all of you may have heard of, a mental health plan, whereby if you go to your GP, they can refer you to a psychologist, and Medicare subsidises, I think they subsidise 6 sessions now for up to 80% of the cost. And that was a massive, especially when I was off work sick at the time. I didn't know if I was going to go back to work. That was a massive relief to have access to that resource. Now I just want to touch a little bit more on what I see as potential ways employers or managers could look to help support their staff. Again, as Tiff said in one of her slides, we have responsibilities to minimise the risk of physical injury in the workplace, so why not mental injury? One thing I think that employers can do is take it a step further than just having an EAP line. So again, on Tiffany's slide, she mentioned mental health first aid. That's a very unique organisation in Australia. They effectively go in and they help to train a number of staff members in organisations for how to effectively administer mental health first aid if an employee approaches a manager and is not in a good way and they're effectively opening up, it trains those managers in how to handle those initial conversations. Again, it might not get every single conversation right every single time, but certainly I've heard of a number of people who have done the course and they have absolutely been blown away by it. I also think that, again, as Stuart touched on earlier, during the COVID crisis, I know I can honestly say as well that even though my job has been fairly secure, I've been working at home now for 118 days, forgot to mention that number at the start, my job has become fairly stable, but I still have felt a resurgence of fear, of irrational anxiety about job losses. One thing that's helped me as an employee there is that my employer has been very open and sent out very reassuring messages. And sometimes the messages have had to be not good news for certain individuals, but they've been relieved to at least know where they stand. And equally so, my employer at the time when I was not in a good place didn't really know how to handle a mental health case, I guess. They had an EAP line and they referred me to the EAP line, but they didn't know what to do after that. And I actually felt, I don't hold a grudge against them because I don't think that they knew what to do. But I do firmly believe from my own experience, however, that implementing a mentally healthy workplace will not be effective if it's just a box ticking exercise. So if you're going to just set up an EAP line, and then I felt that effectively the problem was being outsourced. I think a truly mentally healthy organisation needs to walk the talk. So what do I mean by that? I mean that they need to remember that employees with mental health issues are fragile. So as well as knowing that they will be supported in the recovery, they also need to know how they will be supported. Also, just touching a little bit on mental health charities. I worked at Beyond Blue briefly several years ago, and one of the things I learned from my time there was that most of the calls they get to their helplines are actually not from people who are themselves suffering with anxiety or depression. It's from their friends or family or their loved ones who are calling up because they just don't know what to do or what to say to somebody who's clearly struggling but just will not open up. So you don't have to have anxiety or depression to call these lines. I get contacted every now and again through my own social media channels for the charity asking, what should I do? I can't, and these people are looking for my professional advice, and I can't give them professional advice. I'll always say to them, you have to go call this number, speak to these people, but by all means come back and then let me know how you went. And 9 times out of 10 people appreciate that. Sometimes people think that, you know, they expect a charity to have all the answers. Talking of charities as well, so the reason why I've been invited along tonight is because I established Dancing with the Black Dog as a charity. So Dancing with the Black Dog started off, it's a charity effectively with 2 resources. Started off, as I say, as my blog, which is available, as I say, completely free online. And I also realised a few years ago that, that mental health doesn't have, I guess what you could say the pink ribbon has for breast cancer has in the pink ribbon. We've got great initiatives like Are You OK Day, but we don't have something that people can wear or display every day to show their support for people who are maybe suffering in silence. It's kind of a complement to Are You OK Day. It's a way of silently and visually showing your support. And as you can probably see on my lapel here, I've got a little black dog badge there. And yeah, so I started that initiative off about 5 years ago, and through the beauty of social media and Facebook advertising, I've managed to sell about 100,000 pieces of the merchandise online just off my own back. It is a registered charity, so I don't make any money from it myself. And you can get more details from Tiffany or Stuart after the presentation. Just to close off on what I wanted to say myself as well, when it comes to particularly men seeking help, talking to a counsellor or psychologist, or taking medication, I think there's a general stigma, and a lot of men would see that as a sign of weakness. I'd like to think that we are getting to a stage now where people actually recognise that men seeking help and men being on medication is actually the ultimate sign of bravery. Thank you. Back to you, Tiffany.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, and thanks, Tiff. That's a very brave story, and we really appreciate you sharing it with us, and the work that you're doing to help others now is really commendable. So thank you very much. Now, we've got the interactive bit of the night, so I hope you've all got lots of questions ready for us. So as I said earlier, just if you click on the Q&A, if you move your cursor around and click on the Q&A button at the bottom and type them through, and then I'll palm them off to the panelists and we'll work through them. Just while we're waiting for some questions to come through online, we did get a couple of people emailing us in advance some questions, and I think the first one is a great one. So when someone is not okay and they've said to you that they're not okay, as a trained person, what's our best way forward to support this person? Do we solely listen? Do we offer advice? Do we refer them to a helpline, or all three as and when appropriate? So Tiff, I might kick off with you, and then Mark maybe can come in on that one as well.
Sure, thanks, Stuart, and that is a really good question. So my suggestion would be definitely listen, and importantly seek feedback after listening. So ask, do you feel a bit better now? Observe their behaviour, watch to check they are carrying on with their work okay. If you are concerned about their health and safety at this point, talk again to explore if additional steps might be needed. I would suggest not offering your own advice. This can be subjective, and it may be inappropriate if you don't know other factors present in the person's situation. Refer them to a helpline. As we've mentioned, there's a number out there, a number of them out there. Beyond Blue and Lifeline, for example, also have a collection of resources that could be helpful, and the call centres and chat lines that I've mentioned. Importantly, with those chat lines, those organisations, their staff are trained to listen to the call and then refer the person to the right resource. So it's a great way to learn as well.
Mark, did you want to add to that one?
Yeah, sure. I think as well, it's always important to refer people to helplines or professionals. But if you're put in that situation, and as I have been to as well, through personal contacts, when people put you in a situation, well, not put you in a situation, I'm happy to be asked the question, when people do approach you in that way, it is always important to listen and to reiterate, you know, no matter, I mean, and I know that from my own experience, that when I had my most irrational worries, the last thing that you want is someone to brush you off and say, oh, don't be so stupid. It's to listen, to understand that it's not what they're worried about, it's the fact that they are worried that you're trying to support. So you can always, you know, you can say something like, I can see why you might feel that way. However, from where I'm standing, that's just not going to happen. But I can understand why you might feel the way you feel. Because people don't want, they want to just be heard.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Excellent. There's a specific question that comes through for you, Mark. Curious to know, how many calls or queries do you field a week, and what's the percentage between male and female?
So thanks for the question, Matt. So my charity is, we don't actually have a helpline. Like I say, it's a different approach. So I do tend to get queries more through social media, and it really depends on how active I am with promoting the charity online at the time. I would tend to get probably on a busy time 2 or 3 emails a week, and I would say 2 out of the 3 are from people who don't know how to help somebody else, and usually they're female. I had an email the other day, in fact the first time I had one in a few months, and again, without, you know, I'm not giving away anything confidential here. It was from a woman who had a partner who clearly had a bipolar disorder and felt that her partner was being taken advantage of by his parents, and she didn't know how to deal with that. So again, the only advice I could, again, it was, in fact, you know, a typical example, it was a female who was the one that was more open to trying to talk about it, even though it wasn't her that was in the struggling herself.
No problems. Next question is quite a long one, but essentially the gist of it is that they've got a young staff member that's demonstrating an increased level of absence and unreliability. He's got a mental illness which is being treated. He's also getting support at work through a male mental health first aider. He says he's going well. Work's not the issue. It's his it's issues with his private life. But they're now getting to a point where they are providing all the support they can. But his absenteeism is becoming a problem. We'll give you the ILG hotline around employee responsibilities. But have either of you got anything to add there on any other techniques that they might be able to engage?
Gee, that one's the perfect storm. I don't mean that's everything. And I was reading through that until I saw that he's enjoying work, but it's his home life that is the concern. That's a very hard one to manage. A lot of that would probably come down to the employer's company policy. You know, there could be things around. Again, depending on the organisation, they might be able to offer additional sick leave, but in this situation, it's the home life that's the problem. I think, again, this is probably an example of one of the questions where there's only so much you can really do. If the home life is the problem, you can only help an individual so far. You could certainly try and support them through this, but if they're not in a position to address the home life problem, then that's probably what the crux of this one is. I would suggest that as one. Yeah, somebody would have to speak to a professional. Even the person posting the comment would have to potentially speak to like Beyond Blue, for instance. The reason why I always say speak to the likes of Beyond Blue is because this might be, I've never seen this scenario before. They will probably have seen it several times.
Yeah.
Because they get these calls all the time. And
our employer assist hotline, the same deal. The team in there will have seen this play out before. And I think there's an element here of being quite methodical in addressing all the steps that you can take from a HR perspective. So just looking at all your options for support and performance management together. So I would take quite a methodical approach to it if you are satisfied that you are doing everything you can to help this person as an individual. And it sounds like you're approaching it in a very healthy way.
Excellent. Thank you both. Next question. What tips can you give for getting management on board with reducing mental health? There's, sorry, the screen's just toggled there. Yeah. I had a person call in sick due to mental health, and which we were looking to promote them, and the manager's response was negative. So how do you manage upstream to get senior management on board?
Education is a big part of that answer, and it might be over a period of time. But I think collating and sharing facts about the benefits of providing a mentally healthy workplace and the risks also of not doing it, highlighting that. And there is a lot of information about that paints that picture in a very compelling way across a number of the resources that we've shared already. So I think education, and from all stakeholders' perspectives, so from the employees, the employers, and from the customers' perspective as well. You know, so you can look at this in a very holistic fashion that's good for the business, good for the employees, and good for the customers.
I also think in that situation as well, again, it depends on company culture, company size. In this situation also depend on the manager who is negative, that manager's personality. Having a discussion with that manager in the first place on behalf of the employee, without obviously breaching any confidentiality in the mental health issue, and if that manager is not prepared to change their attitude, change their negativity, then it would be a case of saying, okay, one thing that one of my previous employers taught me that was quite invaluable was not escalating over someone's head, but escalating with them and saying to that manager, okay, if we can't resolve this, let's take it to your manager or my manager together. So you're not threatening them with something, you're saying, okay, you and I disagree on how we're going to handle this situation on behalf of this sick employee. We've got differences of opinion, let's take it one level up.
Excellent, thank you.
Again, that's not always going to be, it's not always going to fix it, but that's just my view on how it can be handled.
That's good. That's good. Thanks, Mark. One from Colin Oates to Tiff. What would be some key points for an employer's mental health policy?
Off the top of my head, key points for an employer's mental health policy, I think it would sit very similar. I mean, the first place I'd go to would be the WorkSafe website and look at health policies for any, you know, for physical and mental health. So I'd probably look at some templates first, then apply that to my workplace and go, does that fit? So am I compliant, and am I providing a solution that is relevant for my workplace as well?
I love this question.
Yep.
Colin, thank you for asking this one in particular, because one initiative I came up with a few years ago, and I thought it was a fairly obvious thing that was missing in many workplaces, was to actually have a policy specifically for mental health. And I took it to a few organisations and I said, you know, a mental health unpaid leave policy. You're not telling people, you know, you don't have to offer people any more than entitled to. But when I was at my very worst, I remember thinking, first of all, you don't want to go onto those specific pages of the corporate intranet, because then you're seen to be looking at mental health stuff. So to have, even just to have something in a staff kitchen or whatever, just to show that there is a mental health policy, and that we could mimic or take extracts from a sick leave policy. Like I spoke to a contact of mine at C.L.E.A.R, for instance, and they actually have a very generous sick leave policy. It's effectively unlimited sick leave. So I think what happens there is that they give everybody salary continuance insurance. So they can effectively say to people, you can take as much sick leave as you want, as long as you're signed off by a doctor. And I think it's NAB, one of the banks, they offer a year's sick leave. But the point I made to them both was, that's fine, but I know from my own experience that when I was at my very worst, I would read that and say, well, that's sick leave, this is mental health. People are going to see them as two different issues. So Colin, the fact that you've specifically called it out as a mental health policy that's brilliant. Thank you for asking that question. And hopefully what I've got on there helps.
Yeah, definitely. This is probably a good segue. An attendee is actually who is an accredited mental health first aider. Aider has shared what they use as a mental health first aid action plan. It's referred to as ALGI. So that's approach the person, assess and assist with any crisis, then listen and communicate non-judgmentally, give support and information, encourage the person, to get appropriate professional help, and then encourage others to support them too. So that's a really good approach, good practical approach. Thank you very much for sharing that with the audience. Another question from Matt in a few different parts, but how can the workplace help with providing a mentally healthy workplace? Is it how do you lift morale, have regular gatherings like staff barbecues and team building exercises? So what are some other things that workplaces can do to really promote that mentally healthy environment?
I am very fortunate to work for an organisation. So we've got 1,500 staff organisation, not in the mental health space, and we've got our CEO is very proactive at whatever office is in, walking the floor and just talking to people and being approachable. And I always remember reading the book, the Dale Carnegie book several years ago, the one about how to win friends and influence people. And it talks about one of the successful organisations in America where the MD would literally go down to the production line and talk to his staff every single day. Okay, I'm not suggesting that a CEO would get time to do that every day, but just making themselves be approachable and showing that, and I've worked for organisations before as well where the MDs and CEOs are very aloof and egotistical, and that drives negative mental healthy workplaces.
And certainly from my experience, and it's interesting, a couple of the suggestions there, Matt, and these can be really helpful, but they're not things that you need to do all the time, right? So things like regular staff gatherings and team building exercise, they are great every so often. But what really ties it all together is, and it lends itself to what Mark has just suggested, that everybody in the workplace lives values, shared values every day. So when you treat each other with respect, when you build trust over time, when you give people the space that they need to do their best work, and when you have a team that feels confident and comfortable enough to motivate each other and support each other, that creating a mentally healthy workplace, that if you live with your values, you've got a great foundation there. And then in terms of specific actions, and I mentioned a couple of times leading by example. So what Mark's talking about with a leader being present on the floor, yes, very valuable. It's also important to have, and I think you can do this regardless of the size of your business, and that is promoting the right type of learning and development. So being a leader who shares updates on discrimination, on privacy, on inclusion, on diversity, these are the different types of mental illnesses, and they could be present in our workplace, and we may not know about it right now, we may know about it later, but just expect that it could be present and be open-minded to it. I think the point in ALGI, and something we've touched on as well, about listening, actively listening and listening without judgment, is super important. Super important to get rid of any risk of anyone feeling ashamed or less than anyone else in the room. Mental health is like any other health issue, and it should be, anyone who's brave enough to share it, it should be rewarded with respect.
Excellent. We've just ticked over 7 o'clock, so that's probably a good place to end it there. So just in a couple of closing comments, just a couple of reminders. Again, we will send a link to Tiff's presentation pack from tonight. We've also, I think, got a link to a video or two from Mark that we'll share with you as well. As you saw, Tiff's presentation does have contact details for Lifeline, Beyond Blue, and other really helpful mental health organisations. And we'd encourage you, if you do know of anyone either through your work or privately that you think needs urgent support, we'd certainly encourage you to refer them on to professionals to start the process of working through their issues, because the worst thing you can do is just ignore it and pretend that it's not happening, because those people really need your support. And as we've said tonight a number of times, if you do need information on workforce management issues with regard to this or any other employee-related issues, and your obligations as an employer, the team at AAAA Employer Assist, led by Emma Daly, are just absolutely fantastic. It's a free service for all AAAA members, and that number again is 1300 369 703. So just in closing, I did really want to take this opportunity to thank Tiff and Mark for their thoughtful and insightful presentations tonight. And Mark, particularly to you for bravely sharing your experiences and insights. I know, I can imagine it'd be a very difficult thing to talk about. There's a lot of personal experiences that you're sharing. And the fact that, you're doing it, you're basically building on your learnings and through the experience that you went through, and now supporting others with similar issues, I think is really commendable, and we thank you for that. The AAAA will be making a donation to Dancing with the Black Dogs charity after tonight, and we'd encourage others to do so, and check out Mark's blogs and website. I think you've got a new website being launched in a couple of weeks. So, but Mark, thank you so much for giving up your time and expertise to support us and our membership tonight.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problems at all. Thank you. And finally, I just wanted to thank everyone that's on the webinar as an audience participant tonight. Thank you for giving up your time for what we think is a really, really important subject, and hope you got a lot out of it. And we also want to thank you for your ongoing support of the AAAA. We really do appreciate it. Our team are working hard. You can probably see we're all in lockdown, working from home. But we're continuing to work hard to support you at what is a really difficult time for everyone throughout Australia, in our industry and more widely. And if you haven't already done so, there's a huge amount of resources now to support you through COVID-19 on our website, aaa.com.au. So visit that section and you will find a huge amount of support there for you. So in closing, thank you very much for joining us again, and I wish you all a very good night, and stay safe and support each other during these difficult times. Thank you again to Mark and Tiff, and thank you all. Good night.